Here's what my 1001 films you must see before you cark it has to say about Battleship Potemkin. The Battleship Potemkin, such a famous film. Sergei Eisenstein's second feature was to become not just a point of ideological conflict between the East and the West, the left and the right, but a must-see film for every cinema lover on the planet. Decades of censorship and militant support, countless words analysing its structure, its symbolism, its sources and effects, and thousands of visual quotations have all served to make it very difficult for us to see the story behind the film. Eisenstein's The Battleship Potemkin may not be historically accurate, but his legendary vision of oppression and rebellion, individual and collective action, and its artistic ambition to work simultaneously with bodies, light, trivial objects, symbols, faces, movement, geometrical forms, and more is a unique keyboard. As a true artist of film, he manages to elaborate a magnificent and touching myth. It should be kept in mind, however, that this aesthetic sensibility was endowed with political significance as well. The changing of the world by conscious men that had been dreamed of in those times and was known by the term revolution, but even without an awareness of what it meant, or better, without a precise awareness of what it eventually turned into, the wind of an epic adventure still blows on the screen here and makes it move. Whatever else one chooses to call it, this adventure is the unique impulse that drives the people of Odessa toward liberty, the sailors of the eponymous battleship to battle against hunger and humiliation, and the filmmaker himself to invent new cinematic forms and rhythms. The Battleship Potemkin has been seen too often in excerpted form or on the basis of its most famous scenes and sequences. It may come as something of a surprise to find how powerful it is to see the film in its entirety, that is to say, as a dramatic and touching story, rather than treating it as a priceless jewellery box from which to remove individual pieces on occasion. Such a renewed, innocent approach to the film will bring back a real sense of being to those icons that have become familiar to us all. The baby carriage on the steps, the face of the dead sailor under the tent at the end of the pier, the worms in the meat, the leather boots, the iron guns pointed toward bodies and faces, the glasses of a blind political, military and religious power waiting in the void. Then, before it becomes all ideological interpretation, the stone line coming alive to roar with anger and a desire to live will become a metaphor for the film itself, and for the high and daring idea of cinema it was bearing, escaping from its monumental status to be found alive and fresh once again by every new pair of eyes that looks upon it. Another Wikipedia article circa late 2014. You might be wondering, why do you look at the older versions of these Wikipedia articles? I think these articles and discourse in general went off the rails for a variety of reasons, mainly due to people posturing and trying to show off on social media, the Twitter/Letterboxd verse. There's this cancerous strains, as far as I'm concerned, to film discourse. So we look at the pre-2015 era sort of stuff, as far as I'm concerned. Battleship Potemkin, sometimes rendered as Battleship Potemkin, is a 1925 silent film directed by Sergei Eisenstein and produced by Mosfilm. It presents a dramatized version of the mutiny that occurred in 1905 when the crew of the Russian battleship Potemkin rebelled against their officers of the Tsarist regime. Battleship Potemkin has been called one of the most influential propaganda films of all time and was named the greatest film of all time at the Brussels World Fair in 1958. Now, we're going to read out film style and content. The film was composed of 5 episodes: Men and Maggots, in which the sailors protested having to eat rotten meat; Drama on the Deck, in which the sailors mutiny and their leader Vakulinchuk is killed; A Dead Man Calls for Justice, in which Vakulinchuk's body is mourned over by the people of Odessa; The Odessa Staircase, in which Tsarist soldiers massacre the Odessans; The Rendezvous of the Squadron, in which the squadron tasked with intercepting the Potemkin instead declines to engage, lowering their guns. Its sailors cheer on the rebellious battleship and join the mutiny. Eisenstein wrote the film as a revolutionary propaganda film, but also used it to test his theories of montage. The revolutionary Soviet filmmakers of the Kuleshov school of filmmaking were experimenting with the effect of film editing on audiences, and Eisenstein attempted to edit the film in such a way as to produce the greatest emotional response so the viewer would feel sympathy for the rebellious sailors of the battleship Potemkin and hatred for their overlords. In the manner of most propaganda, the characterization is simple so that the audience could clearly see with whom they should sympathize. Eisenstein's experiment was a mixed success. He was disappointed when Potemkin failed to attract masses of viewers, but the film was also released in a number of international venues where audiences responded positively. In both the Soviet Union and overseas, the film shocked audiences, but not so much for its political statements as for its use of violence, which was considered graphic by the standards of the time. The film's potential to influence political thought for emotional response was noted by Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, who called Potemkin a marvelous film without equal in the cinema. Anyone who had no firm political conviction could become a Bolshevik after seeing the film. The film was not banned in Nazi Germany, although Himmler issued a directive prohibiting SS members from attending screenings as he deemed the movie inappropriate for the troops. One of the most celebrated scenes in the film is the massacre of civilians on the Odessa steps, also known as the Primorsky or Potemkin stairs, this scene has been described as one of the most influential in the history of cinema because it introduced concepts of film editing and montage to cinema. In this scene, the Tsar's soldiers in their white summer tunics march down a seemingly endless flight of steps in a rhythmic machine-like fashion, firing volleys into a crowd. A separate detachment of mounted Cossacks charges the crowd at the bottom of the stairs. The victims include an older woman wearing pince nez, a young boy with his mother, a student in uniform, and a teenage schoolgirl. A mother pushing an infant in a baby carriage falls to the ground, dying, and the carriage rolls down the steps amidst the fleeing crowd. The massacre on the steps, which never took place, was presumably inserted by Eisenstein for dramatic effect and to demonize the imperial regime. It is, however, based on the fact that there were widespread demonstrations in the area, sparked off by the arrival of the Potemkin in Odessa harbour, and both the Times and their resident British consul reported that troops fired on the crowds of accompanying loss of life. The number of casualties is unrecorded. Roger Ebert writes that there was in fact no Tsarist massacre on the Odessa steppes scarcely diminishes the power of the scene. It is ironic that Eisenstein did it so well that today the bloodshed on the Odessa steppes is often referred to as if it really happened. The scene is perhaps the best example of Eisenstein's theory on montage, and many films pay homage to the scene, including Terry Gilliam's Brazil, Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather, Brian De Palma's The Untouchables, Tibor Takak's Deafline, Laurel and Hardy's The Music Box, Chandrasekhar's Narvekar's Hindi film Tezab, Shuko Murasi's anime Ergo Proxy, and The Magic Christian. Several films spoof it, including Woody Allen's Bananas and Love and Death, Zucker, Abrams and Zucker's Naked Gun, 33 and 1/3 The Final Insult, though actually a parody of The Untouchables. Soviet-Polish comedy Deja Vu, Jacob Tierney's The Trotsky, it's an awful fucking film, and the Italian comedy Il Secondo Tragico Fantozzi. The 2011 November 7th parade in Moscow also features a homage to the film. The painter Francis Bacon, 1909 to 1992, was profoundly influenced by Eisenstein's images, particularly the Odessa steps shot of the nurse's broken glasses and open-mouthed scream. The open-mouthed image appeared first in his abstraction from the human form in Fragment of a Crucifixion, and other works including his famous Head series. The Russian-born photographer and artist Alexei Titarenko paid tribute to the Odessa steps shot in his series City of Shadows, 1991 to 1993. By using a crowd of desperate people on the stairs near the subway station in St. Petersburg to demonize the Soviet regime and as a symbol of human tragedy.